Yeah, your audio is good. Okay, cool. Tonight on the PowerScripting podcast, we are pleased to have with us Chris Smith from Google. Welcome, Chris.
Hello. Thank you very much for having me.
I believe you were our first Googler.
I think so.
I am not surprised by that. There are a few examples of PowerShell being used at Google for system automation and things, but I believe I am the very first Googler writing new PowerShell commandlets and trying to build stuff on top of them officially for Google.
That is awesome. So let's back up a little bit and tell us a little bit about you. How did you get into IT and bring us up to where you are today?
So right out of college, I worked for Microsoft, and kind of the first team I worked on was Visual Studio and developer tooling. And so I worked on Visual Studio 2005, 2008, 2010, and at the very end, I was on the F# team working on the very first release of the compiler, tools, libraries, and so on. And then around 2010, I joined Google, again working in developer tools for, say, source code indexing, code search, those sorts of things. And then I worked on several other projects at Google, from the core search engine to Google Plus for a while, and I eventually found my way to the Google Cloud Platform, which you may have heard of the cloud. It's like a thing or something. We're still figuring it out. And the developer tooling space for Google's cloud, there's just a lot of stuff that people are working on that's like really neat, and all the big data, the sort of bringing the Google scale for things like logging and whatnot. It's great. But the one thing that was missing was the developer tooling for Windows, right? Like having a Visual Studio add-in, having PowerShell support. And so I started on that team, and currently I'm the tech lead / manager of all that stuff. And so the PowerShell side of creating commandlets and accessing Google Cloud from PowerShell, that was kind of my baby. So there are a couple of other engineers who are now working on that. And kind of fixing all the mistakes I made as I wrote the first version of our module.
I'm sure it's perfect, Chris.
If you looked at the GitHub issue tracker, you would be proven otherwise.
So, was there? Did you have to work to get this project off the ground, or was the demand already there?
That's a great question. A little bit of both, right? The hardest part was just getting the data and validating that, right? It's easy to say like, hey, Windows users are kind of out there. There's a big demand for using Windows on cloud, and I think everybody just has an intuition like, yeah, sure, of course, right? But trying to underline like, not only is that true, we need a team around this, right? And we need to build these specific types of tools. When there's already a command line tool for accessing cloud resources, why do we need PowerShell? Can't Windows users just use this other CLI? Or, hey, I heard Bash is cross-platform. Why don't we just use Bash on Windows? And so, yeah, part of my job in the beginning was just kind of gathering data, talking to customers, and working along with DevRel or PM and other engineers, just trying to get as much data to convince our upper management, like, hey, all of these dev tools are important for Windows, PowerShell being one of them.
So was there, now how mature, how old is kind of the .NET side of coding at Google itself? Were there things that you were building from scratch, so to speak?
Mm-hmm. So if you have had children before, you may be familiar with new baby smell. Like babies just kind of have this weird smell to them, and all of the tools at Google in the .NET space probably still have new baby smell.
Yeah.
They're still in beta, our Visual Studio extension, our PowerShell extension, and some of our client libraries, and we launched those I think just earlier this summer. We had an alpha earlier in the year, but they're definitely still new, and so we're eager to just get them in front of customers and start getting feedback on is this the right thing? Is it too easy, too hard? What sort of things should we document more of? that sort of thing. So yeah, there are a lot of C# developers and former Microsoft people, or if John Skeet works at Google now on C# libraries for the Google Cloud Platform, but before that he was working. I think he started in ads somewhere, not doing .NET, not doing anything Windows related, and so we're just kind of like forming our own little cabal of Windows and PowerShell users at Google.
So, do you think that having Google Cloud Platform, did that sort of force this? Because if you have a cloud and you have the ability to run platforms other than Linux, for example, if you want to attract customers that run those platforms, then you have to therefore produce interfaces that those customers are familiar with. So it seems like those kind of all came together to me.
Yeah, definitely. I think the Google Cloud Platform supported Windows VMs. I think starting in like 2015 or so. So it's still relatively new, but it's been out for a while.
How long has Google Cloud GCP? How long has that been public?
I should know this. I'm quickly typing into Wikipedia. Google Cloud Platform.
Let's all figure this out together.
Yeah. When was the first announcement? Okay, initial release 2011, October 6th. Wow, that's a 5-year anniversary last week.
Yeah, nice.
But it's fair to say that the very first kind of version of Google's cloud was just compute engine, and it really didn't have a lot of whiz-bang features that you see today. I think the machine learning APIs are, I think, in beta now, and that's a great capability. There's also I think earlier this summer we launched support for SQL Server or Cloud SQL, like the hosted database offering, right? And so it may have been around for 5 years, but I would say it's just kind of been reaching a great crescendo over the past few years, just like as we add more and more functionality to it. Right. But I would claim that without those great Windows developer tools, why bother? Why bother?
Do you have container support?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah. The container support for cloud or the Google Cloud Platform, there are 2 great ways to use containers. The first is something called Google Container Engine, which runs Kubernetes, and it manages the VMs. You just give it your containers, and it does the scaling and whatnot. A perhaps simpler way to get started with containers is Google App Engine Flex, which is like App Engine, the platform as a service, except rather than having it run in a certain App Engine sandbox, you just give it a container, and it'll just automatically scale up or scale down your containers, but using the App Engine infrastructure.
Nice.
So everybody knows it's been following the podcast for a while. What I like to do is whenever we're talking about cloudy things, I like to test them while podcasting. So if I ever go blank on you, it's because I was playing with something that you were just now talking about.
That's great. As you can live stream like bugs and stuff you find, and then it's like watch me groan and cringe.
So what motivates you about the Google Cloud Platform? I mean, presumably you have some exposure to AWS and Azure. Kind of what else is going on out there. You're an engineer. You're not a salesman. Like what do you like about the tools that you guys are providing?
So since I've started at Google, I've worked on a lot of different projects and things. And there was a time when I worked on the core search engine, right? The actual thing that serves results. It was the instant index, which is there's a new document on CNN.com. Less than a minute later, it's in the search index. You're good to go. While it seems like magic, okay, that magic is powered by awful, horrible, complicated infrastructure, right? That's
shocking to me.
I mean, I'm sure smarter engineers would be much more effective in, get rolling out features and stuff. But it's like I have 30 lines of code and maybe 100 lines of configuration and just awful time debugging this machine talking to that service, which has shared memory with this other thing. And it's just kind of a mess. And being able to expose that powerful capability, like thousands upon thousands of machines or terabytes of RAM, but in such a way that it's easy and just works, that's the thing that really excites me, right? Because writing a lot of distributed systems at Google, like I know how it's done, and I also know what a pain it is. And when we're exposing things from cloud, specifically via PowerShell or via C# APIs, it's actually just very simple to start up and run really complicated apps. And so being able to just make this whole technology approachable and usable, that's the thing that really gets me excited.
So what do you think you've done as far as, well, let's talk about the product here that you're working on. Cloud Tools for PowerShell, is that the
That's
right term there?
the official marketing name.
Okay, gotcha. Where do we find it? I found my way to a couple of different websites. One here looks like it's a GitHub IO site, and the other is on Google.com. I imagine they kind of link back to each other. But walk us through what you guys are providing, and then we'll kind of drill into some of those details.
In the Slack channel, I put the kind of main landing page, cloud.google.com/PowerShell.
Oh, perfect.
So what we're offering is essentially a PowerShell module that exposes a variety of Google Cloud Platform resources. And we don't cover all of the Google Cloud yet, but we're working on just expanding that as quickly as we can. So with the Google Cloud SDK, that's the set of command line tools that you would use to access Google's cloud today. On the Windows installer, there's now an option to install Cloud Tools for PowerShell. And when that's installed, we put our module on the machine, and then you have access to all of these commandlets. Okay. So you could use the existing SDK like you could before, but now rather than using the GSUtil tool for accessing the nearly infinite Google Cloud storage, or using these other G-Cloud commands that would read and write, say, text to the screen, now we have strongly typed PowerShell commandlets for spinning up compute engine instances, and you can see all of the properties. They interact well with, say, PowerShell pipelining, or like out grid view, right? These other commandlets that just provide a much richer experience. So today we ship commandlets for Google Cloud Storage, Google Compute Engine, which is the VM service, a Google Cloud DNS, which is similar to AWS's Route 53 for managing DNS, and Google Cloud SQL, our hosted MySQL offering.
So is there a path that you're taking to kind of fill out the breadth of the services, or are you going to, stop at a certain point and, just kind of wait for demand, or what's the plan there?
The plan is, in the fullness of time, which is one of these magical PM words, we'll do everything, but the kind of how, since time and resources are limited, we're trying to get to a point where we cover, say, 90% of the top 250 or 500 or 1,000 cloud SDK commands. And so using
how many are there?
For the cloud SDK? Oh gosh.
Yeah,
I don't know. Here. Let's say 5,000 in total.
Okay. So
maybe even more. Yeah, well, they come in groups, right? So for, say, Compute Engine or the Pub Sub or App Engine, there's maybe, each of those has maybe, a few dozen or so commands. Say the Cloud Logging, which is one of the most popular commands, like you can list the log messages for a VM running in the cloud on your command line. Yeah. And so it's like 2 G-Cloud commands, but it gets, a significant percentage of all traffic. So anyways, we're just, I wish it were more exotic or exciting, but really we just have a spreadsheet where we sort them by how many times the Cloud SDK command gets invoked. And then it's, hey, do we have a commandlet for this? If not, we should probably add one, and then just figure out, when to put it on the roadmap.
Yeah. But that's perfect, though. I mean,
Yeah, it really is.
You said you have the number of times that an SDK gets invoked. That's all that's better than a survey, right? I mean, that's what people are doing right now.
We have a question from the audience.
We do.
Oh,
and normally what we do is we'll feed those to you, but you're welcome to read off the screen and respond to it.
Yeah.
Well, it'll be a test.
Yeah, I'm just trying to manage all these windows. So
See, I know there's a bit of a skill to it. So Chris, the question from the chat room was, do you know what the PowerShell gallery is? Have you thought about getting your module listed on it?
I do. And this is something that when we started this is one of the things that we're really excited at Google to be interacting with the PowerShell community and also the greater .NET community, is to just get the sort of context about like, what are the important things, right? So in the .NET world, since I used to work on Visual Studio and the language teams, I have a lot of context on like, these are the, NuGet packages is how you deploy libraries done. But personally, I didn't have a lot of experience with PowerShell. And so I it didn't even cross my mind until somebody reported an issue on our issue tracker. And it's like, oh, hey, this actually is a thing, the PowerShell gallery. So to answer the question, do we plan on putting it there? There aren't any short-term plans like by the end of the year, but it's something we want to consider getting to in the future, like hopefully in the first half of next year. The challenge is mostly a technical one. So currently, the way that we authenticate all of our commands for, say, managing resources is by piggybacking on the credentials that are stored with the Cloud SDK.
Okay.
So you log into the Google Cloud SDK, and then we just kind of reuse all your configuration and settings and whatnot. And so if we put the commandlets on the gallery, we would either need to install the Cloud SDK with that, or re-implement the way that they store the credentials and whatnot in a compatible way, so that you could interoperate either with one or the other, or if you have both installed, it just works the right way. Mm-hmm. So it's on the long-term roadmap, and keep bugging us about it. We'll do it. It's just a matter of working with the Cloud SDK team to essentially document all of these like the implementation details, so that we can just build on top of it.
So you may have already mentioned this. If so, I'm sorry. But so the way you get your hands on this module is to install the Cloud SDK, and the module's a part of that? Okay.
Yeah. If you just install the Cloud SDK for Windows, it should just work.
So with the cloud storage support, can you upload and download files to it?
Yeah. The Google Cloud Storage is a generic blob store, right? So you just put essentially files up in the cloud, and we have commandlets for reading and writing and updating metadata of all of of your cloud storage buckets and your cloud storage objects. Although, shameless promotion here, just last week we launched a PowerShell provider for Google Cloud Storage. So you can navigate directories using CD and dir, and it acts as if you have a local file system that is just really, really, really big.
That's awesome.
A huge GS drive that you can put petabytes of information in. We're working on a blog post and kind of like an announcement for that. Hopefully that'll go out this week. But that's kind of like the latest and greatest feature we have.
So do your copy and delete commandlets have recurse parameters?
I believe so.
Because the Azure ones do not. And
what?
And for like the first time in 10 years of doing PowerShell, I had to write recursive functions to copy files and delete them.
Really?
From Azure storage.
Yeah, no.
It was crazy. I can't believe that.
Copy and delete have recurse. Here's what I'm going to do, because I'm a nice guy. All right. If we don't have recurse on copy and delete, boom, it's going to be done. All right. Tomorrow, it's going to happen.
Right on.
Full disclosure, when I first implemented the commandlets, I didn't implement the ability to upload an entire directory and like recursively all the files beneath it. And everybody kept asking me for it, right? And like usability studies, they're like, hey, people want to do this. Why haven't you implemented it yet? And I was like, oh, well, there's this conceptual difference between a file system and cloud storage objects. And eventually I was just like, people keep asking for it.
We just like, stop. Your sentence is already, I don't care. Did you not hear what I asked you?
It's like, it sounds like you're telling me no, but you're wrong. You just need to add that. Yeah. So I think we added that like last week. We had someone new joining the team, and I was like, great, please add this commandlet. Everybody will love you. And it's kind of a shame I didn't do it already. I'm sorry. Cheer.
Yeah. If you want to remove an Azure storage, like if you've set up an Azure share, I'm trying to retrain myself, and you want to delete the directory, you can only do it if the directory is empty. So you have to go delete the files out of there, and then you can delete the directory. That just
I believe we
really
have for deleting a bucket. I believe if you pass in force, we'll nuke the whole bucket and all its contents for you.
That's the way it should be.
All right.
Right on.
Well, that's good feedback, because at being relatively new to PowerShell and not having used it for years and years, having all of these idioms, right? The way that you expect things to work, that's the really valuable part, and something that in designing our commandlets, we just spend perhaps the majority of time on, right? It's antagonizing, is it value? Is it content? Is it, right text or something?
Right.
And just getting those right so that it just feels natural.
Did you guys, go through and read the documentation from Microsoft about the, for example, the verbs and the nouns, and all that good stuff?
Yeah, those were certainly required reading when starting the commandlets. And and this is another one of those places where like just getting great feedback from the community, because there were a couple of instances where there wasn't Microsoft approved verb. And so it's like, well, this seems like kind of a corner case. Let's add a new verb, right? And it's somebody reported on GitHub like, hey, no, really, you should use these approved verbs, even if it's kind of a stretch. Like, these are the verbs thou shalt use. And it's like, great. Yeah. I'm happy to make these changes while we're in beta and trying to get it right. I think one of the specific examples, I think it was like resizing a disk for a VM image. I don't believe there was an approved verb for resizing something. And so, anyways, that's
what did you end up with? Set?
I think set. Well, I don't know if we've made the change yet. There's an issue about us needing to do that.
There was a point at which the PowerShell team they got snitty about it, and they're like, no, seriously, you have to use. We really want you to use these verbs. I want to say that was version 3 or 4. Mm-hmm. Where there was a warning once you imported a module. If it didn't use approved verbs, you got a warning.
Yeah, we'll gripe at you.
It's a very polite slap to the face. It's like, okay, you've imported this dirty, terrible module. I mean, if you want to use it, sure, but just so you know, it has unapproved verbs.
Right. Curious now. I'm going to look at the.
So, how did you go through the process of what all should be part of a commandlet? Because some companies, they like to, they'll end up shipping fewer commandlets that have, tons of parameters to do, everything under the sun. And other companies they'll just ship 600 commandlets, and, they're commandlets specific for the function that you want to do with just a few parameters.
Yeah. Being kind of late to the PowerShell for cloud game means that we get a benefit from looking at the way Azure's PowerShell commandlets were written and the way AWS's commandlets were written.
Okay.
Right? Looking through the commandlet reference docs, you can see just how complicated or simple they've made, the Azure Storage Service or Amazon's S3, right? Mm-hmm. And so that was a big factor, especially for the cloud storage and compute engine, which were the first big set of commandlets that we were writing, so that we could kind of compare and see how we fared with regard to how many nouns we're exposing, how many parameter sets on average we're exposing. And in general, we've tried to err on the side of having fewer really, really complicated commandlets and just having more of them.
Okay.
So I think there are a few examples where we have like maybe 4 or more parameter sets for really common ones, but not necessarily because they're complicated operations.
Oh, sure.
And examples where otherwise you'd have a really, really complicated commandlet, we've just broke it into 2 or 3. So for example, the creating a new VM object or creating a new Cloud SQL instance, there are a lot of parameters and configuration dials and knobs that you can tweak. And so rather than just having one new instance, new VM commandlet with a bazillion parameters, we used a pattern where you create an instance object and then you instantiate that instance object. And that also means that with the instance object, you can manipulate it imperatively by just like setting properties on it before you pass it to another commandlet.
Yeah,
it sounds like a pretty good pattern.
Yeah, it does.
So it seems that maybe the Azure commandlets aren't the best frame of reference. Is that what I'm saying?
Well, for example, not having a recurse parameter on deleting.
That's a shame. I can confirm that Google has those if I'll post date that promise by the end of the day tomorrow.
No, that's good. So, are there? Can you tell us what's next? What's on the close horizon? Things that are already well enough in the pipeline that you want to talk about it.
Yeah. For PowerShell, the big things coming up are more commandlets and trying to figure out a good way to deploy the cross-platform PowerShell and making our commandlets available on Linux and Mac OS.
Yeah, because I know I think VMware has shipped I think it's private beta or maybe it's public now, but they're working on the same thing to do cross-platform.
Yeah, the more I use PowerShell, the more I don't want to say fall in love with it, but I'm like, yeah, this is really, really awesome. Things I love from grep or from bash, like grep, and just how simple it is. The PowerShell aliases don't quite do it justice, but being able to just get PowerShell and using our commandlets on other platforms, that's going to be huge. And so we have like an alpha of our commandlets built against the .NET Core, and so that you can use it. And our goal is by the end of the quarter, we'll just like put up a like kind of a low-key beta. It's like, here's a zip file, have at it, give us some feedback. Really we're just waiting. We want to do all the infrastructure work so we can like build and ship them, and then it's just waiting for the cross-platform open source PowerShell to just get a little more mature, right? I think Microsoft says it's still an alpha, and I'd hate to like ship our bits on top of an alpha, and if it say explodes or on somebody's laptop or whatnot, I'd be like, sorry,
my bad.
Yeah.
So do you guys work in the open? I see you've got an open source project, but of course that with big corporations that can mean a few different things. So tell me how you guys work with GitHub and with open source and your team.
Everything is in the open that we can, and that's a very strong stake we have in the ground, and it's really paid off. One of the working at Google has this really interesting aspect to it, which is that Google's developer infrastructure is like world-class and amazing, and does all of these wonderful things, right? So for example, when I was working on the core search engine, it's a corpus of just hundreds of thousands of lines of C++ code. If you tried to build that on a single machine, your machine's done for a day at least, right?
Wow.
But because of the way that we have our build system set up and just distributing the build, having the build be hermetic, the type of build system that we have, you can complete a build in seconds, right? It's really amazing. However, that having been said, all of this wonderful build infrastructure doesn't work for C#. It's got nothing for us. And beyond just the benefits of using Google's internal tools, if we did it, kept our work, in closed source and maybe just like did releases to the open, we would really miss out on getting feedback from the external developer community, right? Bug reports, suggestions for features that we should add, and so on. And so, as soon as we were able to just say, hey, we have this thing, it exists, we have a public beta, everything's, open on GitHub. You can see the fork I have personally, and that I'm working on a new version of our commandlet reference website, which is, I guess, another thing that's coming out this month, this quarter. Hopefully I'll get it wrapped up this month. And yeah, using GitHub, I'm a huge fan, right? It's not perfect, but as far as just going where the developers are and providing a really easy way to, just get feedback and work with other individuals, I'm a huge fan.
Do you guys accept pull requests?
We do. One of the things that we definitely need to do is kind of clarify the pull requests. I think as long as you sign the Google contributor license agreement, that all the lawyer cats are happy. And I think we have a contributing markdown file, and I'll just need to review it. But yeah, success in my mind is being able to accept pull requests from the community and really, help build the best product we can. And if you see any bugs, just pull request welcome. Yeah, patches welcome.
Fix them. That's great. So anything else that you're working on that you want to talk about this kind of this space? Are you also working on .NET tooling?
Yeah, my team owns quite a lot, actually, for pretty much the whole C# Microsoft dev tooling stack. And so, personally, I've been very focused on the PowerShell parts because that's kind of my baby. But we have a part of the team's working on a Visual Studio extension, and that's currently in beta. And we have the ability to deploy ASP.NET websites to Compute Engine. Okay. And nice. With the with .NET Core and supporting ASP.NET Core on Linux or Mac OS, it would be really great if Google supported C# on Google App Engine Flex or C# on Google Container Engine /Kubernetes. Man, I really wish somebody would be working on that. But for sure, I can't tell you.
You can't tell us anything about that.
No promises. And the other thing is the client libraries. And, Google has a lot of these fancy schmancy Google, cloud APIs, but if you can't call them from C#, they're kind of useless to you, right?
Right.
And so we've been working on improving the code gen story so that you can call these APIs. And then in addition, this is actually the thing that legendary Stack Overflow developer John Skeet, kind of his day job is writing wrappers on these libraries so that they're just super easy to use, are very idiomatic C# libraries. Mm-hmm. For example, rather than creating like request objects and then you initialize the request and you send it and you get a response object and then you have a pub sub topic or something. Instead, you just you have a topic object and in its constructor it does some things. And it just seems much more natural and easy to use.
Right for a C# developer.
Yeah, and as we build out more of these APIs, as well as tooling for these other compute platforms for Google's cloud, it's actually getting pretty exciting that you can start to see like, hey, if I want to build a cool app, I can use API X on technology Y and deploy it on in a container running on Z.
Now, do you sort of piggyback on John Skeet's work? I mean, do you require that wrapper to be there or not?
In our PowerShell commandlet, we do not, or commandlets, we do not. And the reason for that isn't because we don't love John's work. It's that John's work didn't quite exist yet when we started on PowerShell. There was kind of this chicken and egg problem. And so for newer commandlets that do have these wrappers or veneer libraries, we'll look into it. But ultimately, it's okay for the implementation details of our commandlets to be a little more complicated than we would like them to be, because fortunately, Google pays me to write commandlets.
Right.
So I can't complain too much.
You could probably, rattle off, some things pretty quickly. You've got patterns, and you've been doing it for a while,
exactly.
so.
Frankly, the complexity of our commandlets isn't really that great, just because the API, most of the commandlets are just translate directly to one or two API calls. For example, remove GCS bucket is calling the delete GCS bucket API. The hardest part in the commandlet design is just the PowerShell idioms. Right? What are the parameters? What are the parameter sets? What will we accept from the pipeline, and so on?
So there's a question in the chat room. How do we follow up with you? Listeners follow up with you regarding community engagements?
Send me an email or on Twitter. I'll
A. Chris Smith, I think, on Twitter.
Yes, A. Chris Smith, not the Chris Smith. That was probably taken.
That's good. That's good. So we will send people to A. Chris Smith on Twitter. We'll also send them to the website for which I lost. I had it up, but now it's gone.
Cloud.google.com/PowerShell, right?
Yep.
There we go. Thank you. I finally got back to it. I think there's email address. Excellent. So Chris, before we let you go, there's a question that I wanted to ask you, and this is a question that we ask of all guests on the podcast. So it's a very important question.
Super important. All right.
Okay. Are you ready? All right. So if you could be a superhero or have a superpower, what would it be and why?
Actually, I have a great answer for this. That I think so, because every night while I'm drifting off to sleep, I just kind of fantasize about using the superpower because it'd be so amazing, right? Imagine for a moment that you could go back in time with all of the knowledge that you have and just kind of fast forward and rewind time as makes sense, okay? And so eventually you would accumulate near infinite knowledge, but you wouldn't necessarily be immortal. Because if you could live forever, eventually like the world would end and you're just like hanging out being bored, right?
Where are all the people?
Exactly. But
where's the food?
Like, or you could be like, hey, I really liked the 90s or something. And then I guess the problem is if you were super young or maybe that wouldn't be the best time. But like you can just kind of relive cool moments or try a different path through life.
Oh, that would be interesting.
Without going too overboard. So anyway, it's a little complicated. I guess a simpler answer would be I thought Nightcrawler was the coolest X-Men while growing up. You know, teleporting isn't really something that you can fight crime with, but okay, teleporting.
Nightcrawler is my number one guy as well. So fist bump. So what do we call your other power though?
Time control? I don't know.
Timeline transversal. I don't know. We'll work on it. Work on that. So Chris, thank you very much for hanging out with us and spend some time talking about your project. We really appreciate it, and I know the listeners do too. And we will send them your way for feedback. And everybody go download Google Cloud Tools for PowerShell.
Yeah, thank you very much. And please visit our if you have any issues, visit our GitHub project. Log issues. I'll fix them as quick as I can.
Excellent. All right. Good night. Okay. So that wasn't too bad, was it?
3 cheers for Hangouts.
Yay.
Well, it still exists. All right. So can you ask somebody at Google what is the deal with you guys in messaging?
Yes.
I have on here 4 Google Messenger type applications right now from Google, or 5. Hey, Hangouts, Messenger, Allo, and Duo.
So as it turned, you may not know this, but Google has like 20,000 engineers and maybe 19,835 are just as confused as you. about. And so it's really complicated. I've never heard a good answer for that. There are plenty of good conspiracy theories, and these all, just are artifacts of working at any large company, right?
Right.
Perhaps there are different VPs for these things. Perhaps the code for one was just so bad they had to rewrite their own. Maybe one was trying to do something. It was like a research project, and they're like, "Hey, we need to ship this. Okay, we'll just here's our release vehicle." I haven't worked on the messenger teams. I don't know an official answer for you, but I will say that Allo seems pretty slick with like the intelligent like bot that'll do stuff. As for Duo, I think it's neat, but it just seems like a face or a FaceTime compete, with the benefit that it's cross-platform.
Minus some features like there's no desktop support. You can't log in from multiple devices.
Oh,
It's
really?
weird.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, the no desktop support is not good for me. That's one of the things I love about Hangouts is I can use it for my desktop or my phone or whatever. I can get Hangouts to work, and that's what my family uses. And yeah, video
Is your desktop Windows?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that's one of another I guess trait of our team is we're one of the few groups at Google that do software development on Windows.
Mm-hmm.
Because the rest of the company's either using a Mac or just a Linux desktop. And so, we get to, complain to people about not supporting Windows quite a bit.
Yeah, I imagine to an extent you're a little bit outside the norm there, huh?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's actually really nice because we get to kind of do our own thing, right? There aren't most of the rules that govern our, process or release process or how we go about things, we're writing ourselves on our team. And so there's a lot of autonomy, which is something that I really enjoy.
So do you do agile development in your team? Do you do sprints and all that stuff? And
not really, and certainly not like formal agile. Google's planning happens along quarter boundaries.
Okay.
And so every quarter, every team in the company has like, here's the list of objectives we want to achieve and kind of like the sub parts of that. And so it kind of, an agile type philosophy just kind of falls out of that. Here are the user stories or like the specific things we want to enable and their priorities. But as for, a more rigorous or formalized system, it's never really been necessary in my experience at Google, because usually like the important things get done and the things that don't get done are usually like, we'll just pick them up next quarter.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense.
Well, thanks a lot, Chris. And you may want to hang out on Slack. As I mentioned to you, I guess it was over Skype, speaking of messengers, there's a bunch of going on this particular Slack team. So I see in the IRC bridge room, 1,838 members. So there's a lot of people, mostly through Slack, not through IRC, but it's there for people that feel like using IRC as well.
Yeah. So if you ever want an opinion about what a commandlet should be like, you can go ask in there, and you will get some opinions.
Yeah, no, thanks for mentioning this. I'll also try to speak to my team and have them, lurk as well. Just because, like I said, several times, it's just getting that feedback is great. I think
appreciate it.
I would feel really bad if the next cloud provider that talks about PowerShell support. They're like, yeah, we looked at the Google commandlets, and people are like, no, don't use those as an example. They're all wrong.
No, you're good. You're good.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And again, if there's anything that I can do to help you out, or if you have any questions or anything, just feel free to contact me.
Great, appreciate it.
All right.
And best of luck with the new baby.
Oh yes, I will need it.
Yep. All right. Have a good one.
Okay. Good night, everybody. I can't even talk to Hal because Skype's not working. Stop screaming. Good night, everybody. Thanks for hanging out with us.